Hi, and welcome back to part two. So part two for our prerequisites are linear functions, and specifically we're solving equations and inequalities. So all that means is when we're talking about solving equations and inequalities, what we're solving for when it says solve 4x minus 9 less than 7x plus 15, we're solving for our variable, which in this case is x. So we're solving for x. So let's start. I just like to rewrite our equation in our box so we know what we're working with. And in this case, this is an expression. We know it's an expression because we have our less than sign. Remember, expressions are always going to be less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So we're solving for x. So what I like to do is start by bringing all of our variables to one side. So we're going to subtract 7x from both sides, and we're left with 4x minus 7x is negative 3x minus 9 is less than 15. So now let's bring our 9 to the other side with our 15. So when we add a 9 to both sides, we get 3x is less than 15 plus 9, which is 24. So now we have a very important rule in math, and specifically with inequalities. So we are trying to solve for x, so we want to get x alone. To get x alone, we need to divide by what's in front, our negative 3. So when we divide, we are left with x is less than 24 divided by negative 3 is 8. But remember, our rule for inequalities is when we multiply or divide by inequalities, we have to flip the sign. So when we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to flip the inequality sign. So instead of x being less than 8, what we actually have to do is x is greater than 8. We flip the sign because we divided by a negative. So our x values will be greater than 8. So that's the answer to the first one. And we know that the multiply or divide by the negative rule works because we have to check our work to make sure that we're correct. So there is not much room to check our work for this question. So let's move this box over here so that we remember this rule, but we still have enough room to check our work. So the way we check our work is, let's take our original equation over here. 4x minus 9 is less than 7x plus 15. So we solved for x, and we said that x has to be greater than negative 8 for this inequality to be true. So let's pick a value where x is greater than negative 8. Let's pick positive 1, because positive 1 is greater than negative 8. So every time we see an x, let's just put 1. And then when we simplify this, 4 times 1 is 4 minus 9 is less than 7 times 1 is 7 plus 15. 4 minus 9 is negative 5. 7 plus 15 is 22. And 22 is greater than negative 5, so we know that this works. Okay, so now let's move on to question 2. Let's solve this inequality. 6 times 3x minus 2 is equal to negative 4 times 2x minus 9. So with these equations, we always start with distributing. So let's distribute our 6 to our 3x and then our 6 to our negative 2. So 6 times 3x is 18x. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. Then we're going to distribute our negative 4 to both the 2x and the negative 9. So negative 4 times 2x is negative 8x, and then negative 4 times negative 9, well, two negatives make a positive. 4 times 9 is 36. So now, like we did above, let's combine our terms. So we are going to add 8 to both sides, and it cancels out on the right side. And so when we add 8x to both sides, 18 plus 8 is 26x, minus 12 is equal to 36. And then now let's add 12 to both sides to cancel out. And then we're left with 26x equals 48. So now our last step is to divide both sides by 26 to get x alone. And we're left with x is equal to 48 over 26. And that doesn't simplify to a whole number, but we can reduce the fraction. So let's reduce it. 48 over 26 gets reduced to 24 over 13. So our x is equal to 24 over 13. And now we have to check our work. That is the most important to know that we are correct. So let's take our original equation, which we said was 6 times 3x minus 2 is equal to negative 4 times 2x minus 9. So every time we see x, we're going to plug in our fraction over here, 24 over 13. So 6 times 3 times 24 over 13 minus 2 is equal to 4 times 2 times 24 over 13 minus 9. So we are dealing with a lot of fraction, but you should all have calculators in front of you. And we can solve this using our calculator. So let's start by solving the inside of our parentheses. So 3 times 24 over 13. Well, 3 times 24 is 72 over 13 minus 2 is equal to negative 4 times 2 times 24, well, that's 48 over 13 minus 9. And so what I like to do is now, since we're going to continue to simplify what's inside of our fractions, let's convert our negative 2 to make it over 13. So to put something over 13, well, our negative 2 is actually over 1. So we just multiply the top of our fraction by 13 and the bottom of our fraction by 13. So negative 2 times 13 is negative 26, and 1 times 13 is 13. And remember, this is still equal to negative 2. We just put it over 13 so that we can combine our fractions. And then let's just rewrite this as 72 over 13. And then we also want to do that for our negative 9. So our negative 9, remember, a whole number is always just over 1. So we can turn it into a fraction by multiplying both of these by 13. So negative 9 times 13 is negative 117, and 1 times 13 is over 13. And remember, this is still equal to just negative 9. So let's write it over here. Minus 117 over 13. And then let's simplify our fractions. So 6 times, well, 72 over 13 minus 26 over 13 is 46 over 13. And we say that that's equal to negative 4. And then we have 48 over 13 minus 117 over 13. And that just simplifies to negative 69 over 13. So now what we want to do is let's distribute this 6 into our 46 over 13. So now our numbers might be getting a little bit bigger, but it will reduce. So 6 times 46 is 276 over 13. And then on our right side, negative 4 times negative 69. Well, that becomes positive 276 over 13. And we can see now that both sides of our equation are equal. 276 over 13 is equal to 276 over 13. So we just proved that our x value of 24 over 13 is correct. So that's why checking our work is so important, because we are checking that what we did is correct. Okay, so now let's work on 3. Again, we have some fractions, but this is still doable. So we have 2 over 3x plus 4 is equal to 4 over 5x minus 3. So let's bring all of our x's over to one side. So let's just subtract 4/5 x from both sides. And so our left side is 2/3 x minus 4/5 x plus 4 is equal to negative 3. So now let's subtract 4 from both sides so that we're left with, on the left side, just our 2 x's, so 2 over 3x minus 4 over 5x, and then that's equal to negative 3 minus 4, or negative 7. So the easiest way to solve our fractions, since we don't have common denominators, what I like to do, the rule is to multiply the bottom denominator. So we have a 3 over here. We're going to multiply our negative 4/5 by 3 over 3. And then we are going to multiply our 2 over 3 by the denominator of our other fraction, which is 5. So we're going to multiply, like I said, our 2 over 3 by 5 over 5. So then we get 10 over 15. And then we're going to multiply our negative 4/5 by our other denominator, 3. So 3 over 3 to get our other fraction, which is negative 12 over 15. And so now what this looks like is our 2/3 x, we said, becomes 10 over 15x. And then our negative 4/5 x becomes negative 12 over 15x. And that's all equal to negative 7. So now we can just combine our fractions since they have common denominators. 10x minus 12x becomes negative 2 over 15x is equal to negative 7. And so to get x alone, we just need to multiply both sides by 15. And when we multiply both sides by 15, that cancels our denominator on the left side. So we're left with negative 2x. And then we have on the right side negative 7 times positive 15. Well, that's just 105. Now, what we have to do is, to get x alone, we divide both sides by negative 2. And we're left with x is equal to negative 105 over negative 2. And that becomes x is just equal to 52.5. And now remember, we need to check our work. So let's go over to the right side to check our work. Our original equation, we said, was 2/3 x plus 4 is equal to 4/5 x minus 3. So every time we see x, we're going to put in 52.5. So 2/3 x, 2/3 times 52.5 plus 4 is equal to 4/5 times 52.5 minus 3. So let's simplify. So 52.5 times our 2/3 becomes, so 52.5 times 2 becomes 105 over 3 plus 4. Then our 52.5 times 4 becomes 210 over 5, and then our minus 3. So our 105 divided by 3 simplifies out to just 35. And remember, we're 35 times 4. Our 210 divided by 5 simplifies out to 42 minus 3. 35 plus 4 is 39. 42 minus 3 is also 39. So since we have both sides equal to one another, we know that our answer is correct. Our answer is 52.5, but you can also keep it written as a fraction as 105 over 2. But since we have two negative signs, we just have to make it positive. We cancel out our negative signs. So you can keep it as a fraction as long as it's positive. So it's 105 over 2. So that's prerequisites 2. That one's just solving our equations and inequalities. Let's go on to prerequisite 3. So prerequisite 3 says that we are adding and multiplying polynomials. So to add and multiply polynomials, let's start with our first question. So it says to simplify the expression to a polynomial in standard form. So all that means is when it says to simplify something in standard form, it's not what we did all the way in the front page, the first page, where this is standard form. It just means by standard form, it's not going to look like that, but it's just going to look all simplified, so we're not multiplying by anything. Standard form just means each term is separate and it's not being multiplied by anything. So we're going to simplify this big thing over here. So let's start by rewriting it. And I'm going to color code it so it's a bit easier. So let's start with 4x cubed minus 5x squared minus 3x plus 7. And then we have our parentheses. And we are going to multiply it by 2x minus 5. So color coding is just going to help you see how when we multiply each of our terms out, how the colors work. So let's start by multiplying our 4x cubed, our dark blue. So this is FOIL, but FOIL is typically 2 by 2 terms. Right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 by 2. So it's a little bit extended of FOIL. But all we have to do is we take this term and we're just going to multiply it by the first term, our 2x, and then we're also going to multiply it by our other term, negative 5. So we have 4x cubed times 2x, that's our first one, plus 4x cubed times our second term, negative 5. So now we did our 4x cubed, we're done. Now we have to multiply our negative 5x squared. So we're going to add our negative 5x squared and multiply it by our 2x. And then we're also going to have our negative 5x squared and multiply it by negative 5. So plus negative 5x squared multiplied by negative 5. Our next term we have is our negative 3x. So we're going to multiply it first by negative 2x. So we're going to add negative 3x and multiply it by 2x. And then we also have to do it to our other term, our negative 5. So plus, and we're running out of room, but we have negative 3x multiplied by negative 5. And then our last term we have is 7. So we're just going to multiply our 7 by our 2x. So 7 times 2x. And then we also have our 7 times negative 5. So plus 7 times negative 5. So I know this is a lot, but it's going to reduce a lot better. So let's start by reducing our blue. So our blue reduces to, well, 4x cubed times 2x. Let's start by multiplying the numbers. 4 times 2 is 8. And then remember, when we're multiplying our x values together, well, let's do a quick side note. X cubed is actually just x times x times x. So x cubed times x is actually just x times x times x as our x cubed. And then since we have our second x over here, we just multiply it. So what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 x's? Or x to the fourth. So our 4x cubed times 2x becomes 8x to the fourth. Now we are going to multiply our second part, 4x cubed times negative 5. Well, since we're multiplying by a negative, we have our negative. 5 times 4 is 20. And then since we're not multiplying by any x's, it just stays the same. Our next part we have over here, we have negative 5x squared times 2x. So negative 5 times 2 becomes 10. X squared times x. Remember our rule, how we multiplied our x squared times our x? We just add the exponents. So x squared plus x to the first power, 2 plus 3, 2 plus 1 is 3. And then our next part we have negative 5x squared times negative 5. Well, negative times a negative is a positive. 5 times 5 is 25. And then we're left with x squared, and we're not multiplying it by any x values. So it just stays as x squared. Continuing down the line, we have negative 3x times 2x. So we have a negative. 3 times 2 is 6. X times x is x squared. Now, we have negative 3x times negative 5. A negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 5 is 15 times x. The last value we have, or the last two we have, are 7 times 2x. 7 times 2 is 14 times x. And then the very last one we have is 7 times negative 5. Well, 7, positive times a negative is a negative, and 7 times 5 is 35. So now that we've simplified this, we just need to finish simplifying it. So let's combine all our terms. So how I like to do this is we start with the very first term, x to the fourth. Do we have any other values that are to the fourth power? No. So we just leave it as x to the fourth. The next one we have is negative 20x cubed. Well, we have two values that are x cubed. Negative 20x cubed and negative 10x cubed. So that becomes negative 30x cubed. Now, our next value is x squared. 25x squared, negative 6x squared. 25x squared minus 6x squared becomes 19x squared. Then we have just our x values. 15x plus 14x. 15x plus 14x becomes 29x. And then the last value we have is negative 35. This doesn't have any other values to add or subtract to it, so we just have negative 35. So after all that work, our answer becomes 8x to the fourth minus 30x cubed plus 19x squared plus 29x minus 35. And so again, when we see our standard form, all that means is that each of these terms aren't being multiplied by anything. Each of these are its own term. This is its own term, this is its own term. 19x squared is its own term, 29x is its own term, negative 35 is its own term. It's not being multiplied like how we see over here with our parentheses. So this long thing is our answer. Okay, so now let's do question 2. Question 2 is a lot like question 1, but first we have to start by distributing. We have our 3 over here, and so we need to distribute this first out to our 2x, and then our negative 5, before we can multiply out our parentheses. So when we do that, 3 times 2x is 6x, 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. And then we just write the other parenthesis that we have, x squared minus 4x plus 2. So now we're going to do what we did above, and we're going to multiply out using the FOIL method with a little bit of an extra step because now it's a 2 by 3. So first let's multiply out our 6x. So 6x times x squared. And then we are going to multiply out our 6x again by negative 4x. And then finally our negative 6x again with our 2. And so these questions aren't too difficult, it's just a lot of work. We have a lot of stuff to do. So now we are going to multiply out our 15, which remember is negative 15, times our x squared. Then we're going to multiply out our negative 15 with our negative 4. And then finally, remember it's negative 4x. And then finally our negative 15 with our positive 2. So now we can simplify. 6x times x squared becomes 6x cubed. 6x times negative 4x becomes negative 24x squared. 6x times 2 becomes positive 12x. 15 times x squared, remember it's negative 15, becomes minus 15x squared. Negative 15 times negative 4 becomes positive 60x, because it's negative 15 times negative 4x. And then negative 15 times 2 becomes negative 30. So now what we want to do is just combine all our terms. We don't have any x cubed, so we still have 6x cubed. We have 2x squared. Negative 24 minus 15 becomes negative 39. And remember, they're multiplied by x squared. Then we have 12x and 60x. That becomes 72x. And then our negative 30 isn't being combined with any other terms. So this is our equation in standard form. Okay. Now, our question number 3 is just like we did above, a 2 by 3, but we're not going to distribute anything in the front. So, we need to distribute our 3x to our negative 2x squared. 3x times negative 2x squared. 3x times negative 2x squared. Then our 3x to our 4x. So 3x times 4x. Our 3x times our negative 7. Then we're going to multiply out our negative 1 to our negative 2x squared, our negative 1 to our 4x, and then our negative 1 to our negative 7. So let's simplify our terms. 3x times negative 2x squared becomes negative 6x cubed. 3x times 4x becomes 12x squared. 3x minus 7 becomes 21x. Negative 1 times negative 2x squared becomes positive 2x squared. Negative 1 times 4x becomes negative 4x. And then 1 times negative 7 becomes positive 7. And now we multiply our terms, or combine our terms. Negative 6x cubed, there's no other x cubes, so it stays as 6x. Then we're going to combine our 2x squared and our 12x squared, becomes 14x squared. Our negative 21x and our negative 4x becomes negative 25x. And then our 7 term doesn't combine with anything, so we're just left with 7. So our answer is 6x cubed plus 14x squared minus 25x plus 7. And that's our last one in standard form. So next video we're going to be doing our prerequisites number 4. So I'll see you in the next video.